Hey, welcome to the Dripping Stone Podcast, a podcast where two friends raise a glass, or four, and have a conversation. I'm Nick.
I'm Kyle.
Kyle, I say or four because we have a very special episode this week.
Yeah, this is so exciting.
Yeah. This episode is special because this week we're featuring Blind Barrels.
What is Blind Barrels?
Blind Barrels is a bespoke spirits tasting box, a double blind tasting box, if you will.
Yeah, all craft distilleries. Mm-hmm. And it's a double blind experience where you're given 4 bottles about whiskeys or spirits that you don't know anything about them. You blind taste them, you rank them, and then you get to discover what you're drinking.
Yeah. We do want to let you know that what we're doing is we're splitting our conversation and the tasting with Blind Barrels into a 2-part episode. There's just too much amazing stuff in both the conversation with Bobby and in the tasting to really pack it all into one episode. And we didn't want to create an episode that was 3 hours long. This week, you're going to hear our amazing conversation with Bobby, who is the founder of Blind Barrels. And then next week, you're going to hear us actually go through the Release 13 tasting. It's called Heat, that we discuss within this episode. So join us for our conversation with Bobby, and then stay tuned next week for our tasting where we jump into their incredible Heat lineup.
Mr. Bobby, thank you, sir.
Oh, pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me, guys.
How's your week going so far?
We are in knee deep in getting our June lineup out, and we just got screwed over by Father's Day. Father's Day is coming up, and of course, Father's Day is on the 3rd Sunday of the month. Well, it's on the 15th. That's the earliest the 3rd Sunday could be, and I know we're going to get an influx of Father's Day orders, and so I'm always trying to get it out. Like, we've never been late with the shipment, but because Father's Day is early, I kind of need to get it out like 7. We almost always do mid-March, mid-June, mid-September, mid-December. So we're seasonal curation for our boxes, right? And so everybody gets the same lineup at the same time, and then it never repeats. So now we're just in that phase where we're, the bottles get washed, they get labeled, they get filled, and then it's got to run through a distributor, and it's got to come back, and it's got to get packaged. So there's a lot of steps. We're not in a basement with a funnel,
Right, and just multiple bottles.
On top of another 750, yeah.
Although I could see, okay, gotta measure it out. Oh, too much. Yeah.
So, Bobby, how about we start here? Like, give us your elevator pitch on what Blind Barrels is, for our listeners who don't know.
So Blind Barrels, we are the first and only double-blind whiskey tasting experience. We are mainly a subscription. We do have a whiskey community and a membership. And single blind means, hey, I know what the 3 samples are. I just don't know the order of what they are. Double blind means you don't know what they are at all. So our members get 4 samples shipped to their door every quarter, and they're 4 blinds, and they're from small American craft distillers. So when we decided to make these lineups, we didn't think there was any special about Maker's Mark and Michter's, and not that I, don't drink that or order that at a bar, but I can get at that anywhere, at any Total Wine or Bevmo, or, there was nothing, Liquor Barn, and we wanted to really tap into the brands that aren't heavily distributed that are killer. So, when Prohibition ended, the 3-tier system came into play, right? And so the producers in the first tier have to pass to a distributor before a retailer can sell it to the consumer, and distributors got a lot of power over the years, and they still do, and they control who gets the shelf space. And we've seen the scandals where like, you got to buy my 10 cases of vodka just to be in the shop to get that purple top.
Oh, we're aware.
But what happens is you get these small brands that are sometimes making some of the country's best whiskey, and they're rock stars in 50 miles, but outside of that, you'll never hear them, and they don't have distribution. So sometimes we'll end up with brands that are only available in their native state, so we can kind of thwart distribution to a degree, because we got members in 45 states, and now people get access to these brands that most people honestly come for the blind, and the blind is fun, and we gamified it now, so you can guess the age, the proof, and the whiskey type, and you'll actually get a score that tells you how accurate your palate is. So the gamification is super fun, but honestly, people stay with us because of the access. So when you get a bottle, like everything in that lineup that you guys have is practically, some of that's allocated. A lot of it's never been outside of the state or maybe a couple neighboring states. And when we sell a bottle, we don't say, hey, you can't normally get this. Well, you know what? This bottle is $60 at the distillery, so that's what we're going to sell it for. There's a cask strength bottle in there there's actually the lineup you have is called Heat, so everything in there's cask strength, in some cases barrel pick, some cases special releases. Sometimes we have to limit it to 1 bottle per person depending on how much of it we actually have. But we don't do this big upsell on the bottles. Like, we try to sell it for the same price, and oftentimes less than if you were at the distillery.
Yeah, that's something I noticed. There are, as we all know, and in Drep & Stone listeners, and I'm sure a lot of your customers, that there's several companies out there that are doing something very similar. But what I noticed going through your website and just kind of doing some research, you guys, unlike a lot of other companies, are not pricing these bottles so high, the ones that, if you want to buy after the tasting, that it just becomes like why would I do this? And it seems like, in terms of what you guys are doing, is it's highlighting those small craft distilleries in order to broaden the horizons of the whiskey connoisseur, the whiskey initiate, everyone surrounding that idea of just, let's whiskey for all.
Yeah, I always say, look, if you're buying a bottle and you're not supporting us, you're supporting the distillery. So I always say, I dare anyone, any of our members, Google that bottle and tell me, I bet you, I've never found anyone that can do it. Find a bottle for less than what we're selling it for. And then we do shipping discounts too. So if we have a flat shipping rate. So that doesn't mean the shipping costs that, but the shipping definitely costs more than that.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the margins for all of that you're supporting the distillery. And in some cases, the distributors, there's some good distributors out there. There's some smaller ones out there that we have relationships with. And some of the bigger ones we have love-hate relationships with, because, we could have a barrel pick and we're essentially selling hundreds of bottles for them, right? And they don't have to do anything. They just need to take their cut. And then they'll keep delivering like the wrong, not our pick. And it's so frustrating,
right?
Because it's out of my control to a certain level. And
right.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm talking to distributors, I feel like I'm talking to a guy that'll be in my backseat with like a piano wire and a tracksuit. Like, oh, don't worry, we're gonna take care of it. Or they sound like the guy that like raised Anakin Skywalker. Oh, we got to figure it out, though. And I'm like, all right. Not to xenophobe anybody, but
Republic credits.
Right. I think it's too, in our experience anyway, with distributors, is that it seems like for them, and I can't fault them, it's all about money. It's all about the bottom dollar. It's all about, I just care about moving this product. Obviously, that's their literal entire business. But then what that does is it kind of cuts out education. It cuts out access to really cool bottles, if that's all they care about. Where you run into, Bobby, what you just mentioned, where we're giving you product. It's not what you wanted, or maybe even what you ordered, but you got
close
product.
Enough.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And look, like I said, there are some good distributors out there. Look, any other country doesn't have this system, okay? Somebody wants booze, they can get it right from the source. They don't even need a retailer. I get why some of these things exist, and some distributors are really good at getting brands expansion and getting exposure. But sometimes what they do is they'll take on these smaller brands so they don't have to compete against them, and then they don't sell it. Right, so they just gobble it up, and what happens is the FOB and all these costs of getting this freight of this shipment out there, which contractually falls under the distillery, and then they have to actually get it shipped back, and it crushes some of these smaller distilleries, and some of them can't recover from it.
Yeah, we have a lot of friends in the Scotch and Irish whiskey realm, and that's something that they don't deal with on their side. And then when they're trying to break into the American market, it's just nearly impossible. Not only are you fighting against the huge bourbon market as a whole, but you're fighting against, we're just this small whiskey producer, small independent bottler, and how are we supposed to break into this? And so I can't imagine too, a craft distillery who you guys are supporting as a whole, trying to break into a market that is just rife with so many different brands.
And craft, it's interesting, craft has gotten a better reputation in recent years. Fred Minnick used to, kind of crap on, craft all the time. And you can really see in the last few years, he's really started embracing and loving, not just discovering and promoting these brands. We have a partnership with Fred Minnick. We had Fred Minnick kit. We sold out. We're going to do another lineup with him probably later this year. But I'm not saying that everybody in craft, there's 3,000 brands that aren't on your store shelves, right? And
right.
Yeah, half of them aren't that great. Sometimes, there's nothing wrong with young or grain forward if it's really good, right? I've had some White Dog that's mind blowing, right? But, we kissed a lot of frogs is what I'll say. We don't choose brands, we choose whiskey. So my guys, my whiskey wizards, my spirits guys, as I like to call them, I set up blinds for them. Right now I've got 30 bottles for them to go through to kind of help sort out and finalize the September lineup. And they they go through it completely blind and do grade notes. We bring in people that are early on the whiskey journey. We bring people that are late on it. Best idea wins. Every now and again, we do have a debate from a brand because there's so many good things from one brand. Rocktown is a great example. Rocktown's been in our lineup. The first one that I think came out and is the second one in our lineup at a Little Rock, Arkansas. And they sent us 6 bottles and we all had a different favorite and we debated it. And in hindsight, I've now learned to listen to my guys. It's not just like, oh, I put this one first. If someone's like emphatically like really pushing like how much they love, you got to think of the magnitude for the love of that, and that plays a role now.
That's so cool, man. That sounds like a great job to have.
I just whiskey wizard.
Yeah, right.
I know, we just get to sit around and drink whiskey all day. You know, I would say people think it's like I'm like, you know, we're just literally just drinking whiskey all day. I'd say Thursdays, you know, we do a radio show called Four Whiskeys where we kind of do blinds on a local radio show. And so we drink whiskey that day. I actually drink less since starting the company, which is kind of interesting. You know, I have to be very clear-eyed and mindful. I have to think about put the business first, right? So I can't really be hungover all the time or at all, really. So maybe once in a blue moon. I mean, I hydrate a lot, right?
Yep.
Yeah, a guy that one of my guys, Christian, he wasn't drinking for April, but how do you drink and not? So he was tasting and spinning out and still doing through the process and you know, just obviously, you know, we are big proponents of health in general. We do think what we're doing is a healthy approach. We think it's a mindful approach. It's a good way to connect your senses, but it's a great way to connect with other people. I mean, you guys are sitting around and you're drinking whiskey, and especially when you guys play the game, it'll be really interesting. You guys should put some stakes on the line. You guys should put a bottle on the line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally going to do that.
And see who wins, and you're going to talk about it, and it's communal. And, you know, we're not taking shots here, right? We're enjoying being present in the moment with the liquid and the company that we're with. And that's really, if someone has a drinking problem, if I'm around somebody and I pour them a nice pour and they just down it like it's a shot, I'm like, you don't get any more of that. Bring up the Tennessee flavored honey whiskey. Yeah.
Well, that's what you start them with. How are they going to approach this? You know,
I have a brother-in-law who throws crushed ice into, like, I've got a bunch of whiskey at our headquarters that doesn't fit at my house, and my wife doesn't complain. You know, once you get the floor whiskey, then you know you'll start getting the complaints, right?
Whiskey.
Been there, done that.
You don't have
floor bottles.
Yeah, there's no room for the floor whiskey. And I went to take a shower, and I'd come back, and my brother-in-law's there, and he's got a tumbler full of crushed ice. And the whiskey's, it's like, I'm talking about crushed ice up to the top. For me, I'm like, hey, do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, like, crushed ice to me is so sacrilegious. Like, you want to put a big cube in there, you want to put a few cubes in there, you want to even, hey, you want to put Coke with the whatever. You know, if it's really bomb whiskey, I'd say maybe do both. But I'm like, to my wife, I'm like, Courtney, what's in his glass? She's like, I don't know. It's something. And I'm like, I'm like, what did you pour? And he goes, I don't know. I'm like, you're a fucking asshole. I'm like, just tell me what you poured. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that might have been a $200. And I love sharing whiskey. I don't have unopened bottles at my house. I share whiskey, but I would like to share with people that appreciate it.
Right.
Okay, so what did he pour? Do you know?
I think it was a 15-year Widow Jane. So.
Oh, no. Well.
It was the 15, right? I'm like, could have been Widow Jane. I'm like, I can live with just the Widow Jane, but the 15.
Oh yeah.
Which is like,
why'd you do that?
There's not a lot of that. It was really hard to get that bottle, actually. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I figured it out because I looked at it. I'm like, I haven't even drank that one yet. I think he actually opened it and poured it. And I'm like, that's even worse.
Man.
You know?
Wow. Yeah, that's ballsy.
You know, Kyle, something that Bobby just mentioned that I'm kind of like, I mean, just falling in love more with Blind Barrels is that it's about the whiskey itself. And I'm sure, Bobby, you kind of mentioned that you have partnerships with brands, but that it's whiskey focused. And what I really appreciate about that, just as obviously a whiskey nerd myself, is that they're curating things that they know are going to be products that consumer is going to find interesting. Not necessarily because all of our palates are just incredibly different, but here's something you might find interesting.
Yeah, and I love the communal aspect.
Yeah, I mean, like the partnerships themselves so there's no marketing fee. I know how a lot of other tasting companies that are out there, there's marketing, there's costs like that. We don't take any fees from any of the distilleries. They're in the lineup because it passed a blind with several people and people really liked it. We probably get 4 or 5 brands reach out to us every month. I do the conversations with them. They send samples. We put it in a blind. I just tell them the process for that. And so sometimes there's a brand that we know we love there's a brand in this lineup actually we chased for 3 years, and Randy Sullivan is a collaborator on this kit. And sometimes you're just talking to the wrong people, and then they don't know how to sell what you're talking to the next tier, and then they go, "Oh, well, we don't want to white label anything." I'm like, "We're not white labeling. Technically, is what's happening, right? But we're not positing it as if it's our own whiskey." And Randy made a call. I get an email. I'm on the phone 2 minutes later. It's a 7-minute phone call, and it's done. And I'm like, oh, wow. Just was needed to talk to the right person, right? But it's Casey Jones. I don't know if you've heard of Casey Jones. They're a small craft distillery in Kentucky, Pendleton. I forget the name of the city, and just killer people. Peg and AJ, they the original commission still in Kentucky. It's a square still, which is super interesting. We visited them in person, and I was talking to them about the thing, and they're like, "Well, how much is this going to cost us?" And I'm like, nothing. That's all. Because it's awesome. Just stuff. Honestly, like they're 4-year single barrel white label bottle. Everything that they poured, they have 12, 13, 14 SKUs that are all phenomenal, and we sell it for $50 because that's what it is at the distilleries. Their cask strength's like 111 proof, and I think they could sell for 80 all day. It's that good. It's that rich. Wow, it's that amazing, and we don't talk their wholesale down because we're selling a high volume. At the end of the day, we want this to be symbiotic. We want the distilleries to win because we promote them and we're selling bottles for them. We want our members to be happy, and then we're going to be happy because they're happy in the end of the day. Like if everybody's satisfied, then that's at the end of the day, we're big proponents of the whiskey community and the history of it. It's one of the few industries that there's a competition there, but there's a camaraderie that's pretty dope too. And we've witnessed that firsthand when we took a trip to Texas, and they're like, "Where did you stop?" And I'm like, "Well, we were at Ranger Creek and we were Iron Root." And they're like, "We love those guys." And they're competitors in their state, but they're supporting Texas whiskey, which is on the big come up right now, right? And, I just love seeing that positivity, and getting to be a part of that positivity is awesome too.
Super cool.
It's kind of like what the brewing industry used to be before everything just, exploded. Like you said, you have competition, but the competition realizes that in order for all of us to be better, in order for, all ships to rise here, we have to challenge one another, and we have to be supportive of one another.
Yeah, I mean, you look at when Heaven Hill had a distillery that burned down, right? Everyone stepped up and said, "Hey, can we get you some whiskey? Can we get you back on your feet?" We're seeing it with the flooding right now. There's nobody dancing on anyone's grave. Everyone's kind of, mourning their fellow industry people's losses, and asking, "Hey, how can we step up? Are you doing a fundraiser? Can we donate some bottles that'll be a part of raising the money to help you solve these problems that came out of nowhere?"
So, Bobby, when did Blind Barrels get started?
This was technically a COVID baby. My backdrop, I'm a filmmaker. I've made documentaries, and I've run an education company for the last 25 years. I help get kids into college, so I started a program where we do neurofeedback. My partner's a neuroscientist, and we do SAT, ACT, mindfulness test prep, along with college application essay storytelling. And then I've made documentaries. The last one actually took on the NCAA, so I was a college athlete, and the NCAA, the documentary called The Business of Amateurs really focused on the disparity in the money, the gap that exists in terms of who makes the money and who doesn't, the academic integrity, and then CTE. And the movie actually played a role in getting the NIL laws passed. I'm on the oversight committee for that nonprofit. So when COVID hit,
that's cool.
Everything kind of died, right? Like film projects dried up. Nobody was doing test prep. And, I put up a few accent walls and, a few bidets and, and then, the bidet, right? And, there's no toilet paper. I'm like, I'm solving it with a bidet. And,
make some bread.
So brilliant.
Exactly. I'm loading up. We're going to learn how to make bread. We're going to learn how to make our own tools. We're going to do it all. And then like month 3, a coworker where my wife works at, a financial analyst, was who I knew at some of the company events, but I wasn't like super solid with them. He said, "Hey, I'm doing some blinds. can I drop off some samples? And he was charging like, he'd have like a dusty of old fits that he paid $80 for. So he's paying like $3 a pour for it or something stupid. Like
Man,
it was like some
bargain.
$20 kit that had like 8 samples in it, and it had a whole card and a reveal and a process. And obviously that's not something you can do, but whatever, you're doing it amongst friends. You're redecanting it, I guess, is the loophole of what it is, right? And after the first one, I remember I called him afterwards. I'm like, dude, this feels like a business. And he went, yeah, okay. I'm like, because I'd done with wine, I'd never done with whiskey before. And I fell in love. I didn't realize just how nuanced and different and interesting. And, I never really picked up the nuances and the differences between a rye and a bourbon and why that exists, or, single malt and the peated versus non-peated. And what does single malt even mean? Like, what about a triple malt? I didn't know what any of the stuff meant. And so I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. So I basically kept calling attorneys, ABC alcohol beverage control attorneys, and doing free hour-long consultations with them. So I did 17 of those. I just
loophole.
I'm telling you, this is one of the greatest life hacks ever. I've done this so many times where if you need an attorney, you can do an hour-long consultation for usually any field that they're in, whether it's contract law or whatever it is. Hopefully nobody's going through a divorce, but yeah, you can interview several of them and you get feedback from all of them, and then you can decide on, you don't just go in and start paying somebody. And I gleaned enough information. I came up with a way to do it. And that's how we raised the money. But then we came up with a better way to do it. And then we basically spent all of 2021 building all the key partnerships that we had to have to be 3-tier compliant. The liquor licenses, you have to get a location. You got to pass all this city, county, state, federal. There's all this. There's a lot of red tape. I quickly figured out there's a reason that nobody's done this before.
Right.
But I will say I've been lucky enough to have been an entrepreneur my whole life, and every time you make a film, it's like you're starting a new company. But I've been on the receiving end of the benefit of knowing what it's like to breathe life into something and to see that thing flourish and grow and stand the test of time. And the only time where you're creating a legacy like that is when you have a kid, right? And when your kid's really funny and you're proud of them, or and other people appreciate your kid. There's just this proud kind of moment, and so. Blind Barrels is this new baby that emerged that has grown, and we've expanded. Now we've got over 4,000 members, and we started with a couple hundred, and just we've built a loyal audience and a loyal community. And part of that, hey, if you contact the support email, you're going to get me. It's some guy that it's funny. Like every now and again, you get an angry email out of nowhere. And this happened last week where this guy he put in an old address, right? So it got shipped to an old address, and he's really angry. It's like, this is going to my address. I don't live in Georgia. And I'm like, well, I don't control what somebody puts in there. I didn't go in and change your address to some other, and the lady like called him when it arrived. She's like, what is it? She opened up his package, and he's each email he's sending me is just getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And now he's just like, I'm gonna write up a horrible review, and I'm gonna go over your social media. And so far, I've just been really polite via the email.
Right.
And so I just called the guy. And so first of all, I looked up his address, and I looked him up. I'm like, that's his parents' address. He used to live there in 2003. You know what I mean? So some autofill happened. You know what I mean? Like, so I kind of came in armed. I'm like, so hey guys, we don't have to get angry. I saw your email. It sounds like you're a veteran. We support veterans. Look, this wasn't our mistake, but we're going to make it right. We're going to support you as a veteran. And man, that guy felt so sorry. Felt like an asshole. And, you kind of throw the mirror at them and just let them know, like, hey, we're real people. And I also just don't like when there is some unresolved conflict, even just one person out of 4,000, it'll bother me for like days. Where I'm just kind of sitting there. And so I just like to nip it in the bud, give them a call, let them know, hey, we care. I'll jump on the phone. I don't care. I got 10 minutes. Let's do it. But I think that, I think our members, and when they jump on, we do 2 lives every quarter. So when, everyone will get an invite, and we'll have like 150 people on 2 different Zoom lives. and we'll taste with everybody, and we'll get tasting notes, and we'll highlight new members, and we'll talk, and we'll make jokes, and we have a lot of fun with it. And we give away bottles, and we give away coffee. We do all sorts of fun stuff, and it's fun to just kind of see how that grows and grows and grows. And once again, that the community part of it. I discovered a whiskey community through that tasting, and now we're building one. And it's a lot of fun to just kind of see the loyalty and the friendships that have been developed.
Incredible. That's so cool.
And what I'm struck by what you just said, Bobby, is that the creative aspect of it. I mean, yes, you can easily look at this product and just look at, the packaging and look at how it's, by the way, everything's perfect. Like I love the box. I love the packaging. I love the design. And it's easy to look at that, as many consumers will, and they'll just go like, wow, yeah, this thing looks cool. The bottles look cool, but they don't realize.
I appreciate that you guys are, recognized. I'll tell you, making a custom box is not fun. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I'm sure.
That's custom glass. Like making custom glass, it took 9 months and took like literally 8 molds to make custom 50 mLs, like, and make it thick and heavy. We wanted people to associate these smaller brands with top shelf. That was really important for us.
We know as creatives, how much goes into stuff. Obviously, you've done a lot of creative work over your career. So, so many consumers will look at something and go like, cool, here's the thing. But they don't realize that in order to get to this level, it's, so many hours of work and mulling over what you just said, bottles, mulling over how the bottle fits into the foam packaging and what that looks like when it comes out. It's all of that stuff. And I think it's cool that you guys have thought about all of that it's not just like, yes, the whiskey is the highlight thing, but it's the whole experience around it to create this communal experience.
Yeah, even just like enclosures when you're making bottles, just the caps that go on the bottles, it's nuts. Just how do you get this thing? You got to build the bottle around the cap. You got the neck finish, the tamper evident. Are you doing a machine capper? There's space for the finger to pull out of the foam. What kind of foam are you using? What are the dimensions of the box? What about the thing that you're shipping it in? What about the labels themselves? What kind of paper are you using? What are the size of the labels? What's the applicator? How is it left out? Like, there's all these weird little things that, I've been in the service-based industry and I've made documentaries. And so all those different things, I'm familiar with that. I've never made a physical product before. What the one thing that I did when I was raising money, because this was a completely bootstrapped seed operation where, my neighbor across the street, my sister, my best friend, my dad, I'm the biggest cash investor. And we didn't really invest a lot of money because it was super risky. The first thing that I did was create the branding, and I'm a marketing guy at heart. So like when I'm trying to raise money for a documentary, I always make the movie poster, or I make a sizzle reel, right? I make it tangible, and I make it real. And, even just making a logo is a fascinating thing to discover, because what you make creatively in your head isn't going to be what's translated to the person that you're talking to creatively. And that happens all the time between like what I see versus what someone else sees. And thank God our designer saw something much cooler than what I had in my head.
Is the monkey your idea?
The idea, I don't even remember why. Like I listed a bunch of names, and originally we were Blind Spirits, but we ran into a trademark issue with it. And luckily Blind Barrels is better, because eventually we might do beer and wine and get outside. Everything's in a barrel, right?
Yeah.
But the idea was going to be the see no evil monkey, and like his tail was going to kind of hide his eyes, and so that's where the monkey, and technically he's a chimp, which I later learned, but I still call him a monkey because nobody goes, well, I'm like, well, the chimp, and they're like, you mean the monkey? And I'm like, yeah, the monkey. And so when I did this design contest, 99 design, which now Vistaprint owns, for $300, you get 99 designs, and you might get 8 or 9 from like the same person, right? And it's probably mostly people in India and maybe third world countries that are vying for this prize of this thing that you're putting out there. And I did get the monkey tail, the drunk monkey hold. I got the thing that I asked for, and it was kind of cartoony and not that great. And this other guy comes in with the steampunk monkey. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And self-taught designer dude out of Brazil named Flavio, who tried to create a whole clothing line around the chimp. and it never took off. And he saw somebody wanted a monkey, and then we made a lot of tweaks to it with a little bit, like before he had like kind of a big grin, and we adjusted the hat. We eventually put the barrel behind it. I mean, probably 200 different designs that, because there's one that goes on the box, there's one that goes on the label, there's one that goes on the hat, there's one that goes on the shirt. There's all these different iterations of it that, like the gold leaf can't have the busyness of what we see on the actual logo. So there's all these little fine-tuned things that happen, and God bless Flavio, because he, this gave him a career because it built up his portfolio. I've turned him on to 10 other brands, and
awesome.
He's kind of built a career out of it. And he does all of our stuff. Like we did a barrels pick with Still Austin for our December lineup. So we can't do barrel picks anymore because we just have too many people. It would all go into the sample. We wouldn't sell the bottles. So we blended 2 barrels together, and we trademarked the smallest batch. The smallest batch could be 2 barrels, right? So we picked 2 barrels, and it wasn't our 2 favorite barrels. It was the barrels that blended the best together, and it was phenomenal. So I had Flavio. I'm like, I need a sticker, and I want the monkey like grabbing the bull by the horns and like put bottles on his things and just say we messed with Texas, and kind of like White Goodman in Dodgeball where he's like got that painting where he's grabbing the bull by the horns, and the dude pumped out and so I wanted to put kind of a tater sticker on there, and yeah, he's doing it. We're doing it again. We got a 3-barrel blend that's coming up in our June lineup, and so we're just I just got the final touches for that sticker. Once again, he doesn't speak English, and I always end up like doing a Zoom with his daughter who speaks English and will like translate, and but just a great dude, super gracious, and he's going to be working with us for years to come.
So Bobby, you've mentioned that it's a seasonal release. Do y'all have like a schedule of like so many a year, or is it kind of more thematically released? Like once we kind of figure out what we want to do for this release, and then we release it.
We've thought about like, we'll do all from the Pacific Northwest, and we've thought about doing themed boxes, or this is a bourbon box, or this is a rye box. Well, we discovered pretty early on, because initially when we were going to do whiskey every other month, and then we were going to do tequila in the other months, right? And then I realized how much work it is to create one lineup. Like it's such a mother, like the legal stuff that has to happen, just getting on the same page with the distillery, you know what I mean? And getting all the whiskey transferred over, and all the steps and the stuff that has to happen. So when we find the 4 and the timing that we have, like we're getting more and more ahead of our lineups. Like September is technically a theme in that it's all distilleries that our members have recommended. So we're trying to maybe every September do a theme in the sense of it's going to be the members only kit. We might sync up with Fred Minnick for the December kit, where his lineup and our December lineup is the same thing. But it's difficult. What we want is diversity in the experience is the main thing, so that there's a roller coaster. We don't want a bunch of vanilla, brown sugar, caramel bourbons in a row. There's nothing wrong with having, deep, rich, well-aged bourbons, and we have those in the lineup. But we want there to be an experience with it at the end of the day, as much as possible. But yeah, we're quarterly, right? So everybody gets the same kits mid-March, mid-June, mid-September, mid-December. And so we kind of have this 3-month window. There's all these steps that have to be taken in that whole process. And the more we get ahead of it, the less of a crunch time. But man, we've had whiskey where it's literally on a freight and they put a hazmat sticker on it for some reason, but it's not hazmat. And then so it ends up in some warehouse for 3 weeks. So I got to like overnight a freight of, I'm like, do you guys have anything to put whiskey in? They're like, well, yeah, these 1 liter vodka bottles that I'm like, throw them in there and bring it out. And we're just, at one point, I think the Kansas City mob stole 30 gallons, theoretical, of where this whiskey was just missing for like 3 weeks. And then the dude that owned the distillery was like, I think like a made man or something, because he made one call and they found it in an hour. So I don't know. I don't know. So every now and again, there's always
I want to know, actually.
Yeah, there's always something crazy
don't tell me.
that happens with the lineup. Like this lineup, I screwed up because there's a QR code on every bottle, right? And for some reason, when I submitted, I didn't update the QR code.
Oh no!
So, and we're labeling them. We just upgraded our labeling machine, but it's not working yet. Because this is really awesome one that we got used for a good price, but it's not there yet. And so all of a sudden, the QR code's not I go to it and it's going to the March kit. I'm like, oh fuck. I'm like, this is a massive fuck up. And I'm like, I have to like figure all that out. And luckily we're enough ahead. We figured it out. It's a curveball, but I didn't look at the proof, and it was just that one little, little thing like that could just turn into this massive delay. But that's why you always get to it as early as you can. So, any of these curveballs that happen.
So you guys are, in that case, I'm hearing like, 6 months out from each release is kind of where or is it even longer than that? Like where your thoughts are in terms of you're working on it?
We used to be 9 months, but then we did a partnership with the Bourbon Junkies, and it took them so long to decide the lineup that it was like right up against the wire.
Oh.
And damn it, Dan and Sean. And they picked all bangers, and it was great. But then that literally had us staggered, and we were like 3 months out, like for every lineup. And now we're getting 6 months ahead, and ideally we want to be about somewhere in that 5 to 7 month ahead window.
Yeah, just because your buffer. Yeah.
Well, sometimes we've had distilleries. I always have I always have 4 lined up, and then I have one kind of in a holding tank, is that just in case something happens to the distilleries that are committed. Because we had somebody drop out 3 weeks before a lineup once, and it was not cool that happened and how that happened, and and they're like, well, what about the next one? I'm like, I don't want you in the lineup ever now for just doing that. It's like they weren't respecting it at all, and it was unfortunate that happened.
I mean, obviously things happen, but if it's like one of those like we just you guys were put on the back burner, that's not good.
It was a co-owner that was super irresponsible, and we saw it. I saw that there was a potential problem with it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the head distiller was why we were in. I'm not going to name any of it. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but that distiller left and started his own thing, and that was one of the straws that broke the camel's back for that. Ugh. But it was just, that wasn't fun, because then what happened is when we had to move somebody from June to March, well, that person wasn't set up to sell bottles in California, and they needed a distributor there. And that's sometimes like a 7-week process, and or it gets delayed, or you were 30 cents short, so they don't process it, and they don't tell you that. And so everybody ordered, like we had like 200 bottles ordered, and we couldn't ship those out for another 6 weeks. So it's like how this one little thing, this little flap of a butterfly wing, can turn into this other big massive problem. Do
you feel like at this point, are you starting to get a little bit more like name recognition so that it makes that kind of process of navigating distilleries and things a bit easier, or is it still too early in the process?
Yeah. I mean, I think it gets better every time. Yeah, we do have a lot of saturation where brands find us, or when we talk to them, they've heard of us, which is great. The partnership with Fred Minnick, I think, added a lot of clout to that, and just the prestige of what we're trying to do. And most brands get it. Very few don't understand the process, how it works. We make it really easy on them for sure. And it's just the communication, like, we have these templates that, because there's a deck that explains it, but then I'll have the meeting with them, and then I'll really have a follow-up that explains these are the steps and these are the responsibilities. And there's not a lot that the distillery has to do, luckily. But we need to have that expectations. We need to put that out there. I need to get the reciprocation that they're on the same page with us. And so it usually doesn't take that much energy to do that now. So we don't run into these problems that often. And everybody's excited. I mean, we've had now coming up, our 14th release, so 56 brands, right? Technically 55 because Rocktown was in it twice. And we have great relationships with all of them. And we're working on a restaurant model right now. We're looking to expand into hotels and luxury boxes. So we're expanding, and eventually we want to get into tequila. We are going to add a Scotch, rum, and gin kit, but not subscription. But just so could we do a Scotch subscription? We could. But I think whiskey and tequila will be our subscriptions, and then we'll probably every year we'll do a different release for those other SKUs.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, like, you guys have such a kind of a bread and butter thing with bourbon American whiskey as a whole, but you could very easily throw in some independent bottlers. I mean, we have good relationships with independent bottlers that were like, we just want to get stuff out there. These other distilleries have made this, or they've done this, that, and the other to it, and we've aged it in. We've taken a Bushmills distillate, and then we aged it in a Madeira cask for 6 months, and we just want ultimately people to try it. So that excites me too, and excites me of like how much potential is there for Blind Barrels as a whole, just continuing down that path of growth. That's so cool.
We're going to get them data now, too. So part of the game, you'll see it. Right now, the game that you guys are going to play, the rating system is optional. I mean, I'll tell you, building an app, that's a whole other thing. I've never built an app before. It took 9 months. I mean, it's a fucking nightmare. I'm just throwing that out there. It was not fun the whole way through to get this thing.
That's why the Jumping Stone app doesn't exist, because it's a nightmare.
So now we're going to make it so it's required to rate the spirit. Yeah. And so we're going to be able to get the distillery's data on who's liking their product where.
Yeah, and then you aggregate from your members too of, is this, does what our team is doing, does it match what our consumers are doing and what they like too? That's cool.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes it's funny, you'll get something in there that's polarizing, that it's either, oh my God, this is like, there's 4 people in the room that say this is the best whiskey you've ever had. And then there's 2 in the room that'd be like, I can't stand this whiskey. We can't please everybody. If I got 20 people in a room, 3 will say A is their favorite. Same will be true for B, C, and D. Yeah. And then, so there'll be somebody that hates A, and there'll be somebody that hates B. And sometimes, like, there's a whiskey, I'm like, I don't know how anyone could hate this whiskey, and somebody will. Like, we had the Doc Holliday. You've probably seen the Doc Holliday bottles. Well, we got the Lost Barrel. They sourced, it wasn't MGP or Dickel. They sourced, it's the Lost Barrels of Whiskey Outlaw. It's literally this guy, Carlos Lavelle. They were moonshiners for 150 years. And, I mean, they found these barrels in Texas, and it was never meant to be well-aged. And maybe the richest, my guys, when I put it in a blind, they thought it was William LaRue Weller. Like, they were like, what the fuck are you fucking with this bottle? Like, it was so good. We sold it out of existence. I think there's 2 barrels they got that they're taking to 12-year that I think we've got it earmarked for us, that we're not going to put it in a lineup. We're just going to sell it. We found this massive audience, but that was a bottle they normally sold for 200 that I think our members got for like 120.
Wow.
Secondary right now, because those 10-year of the Carlos Lavelle whiskey, they go for $500-$600 now.
Wow.
So it's kind of cool where it's kind of built up this following.
So cool.
You know what? I'm so excited to get into this.
Yeah, me too. I'm like itching to like start this now.
I want to know who won. That's all I want to know. I want to know what was the bottle. I want to know who won. And look, you don't have to get the proof on the nose. If you get close, you'll get points. And it's not like, if you get 55%, like, in terms of your points out of the total points, that's actually pretty good, right? It's if you're like below 30 is where you're getting like, like you couldn't tell it was a bourbon, you couldn't tell it was rye or whatever it was, because that's either you're right or you're wrong. But I mean, the proof one, you do have a little bit of a hint because it's heat, right? So obviously there's a high proof element to this particular kit. I mean, and this is all bangers, but you know what? You'll get somebody that's like, the whiskey was a little high proof, and I'm like, you can proof it down. You can like put an ice cube in it.
Yeah, just a little splash, it'll be fine.
Like the high proof is meant to like, to proof it to your liking, not to.
Correct.
There you go.
Oh, let's see how tough we are. Although I like it. Try it hot.
Try it hot. Well, that's what we do, and so many listeners, they'll write in, they'll say like, you guys recommended this, blah, 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 and it was just too much. I'm like, of course it's too much. Proof it down. First of all, I think try it how it's meant to be tried. If it's 130 proof, it's gonna be hot, and that's okay. Try it, and then go, you know what? Let me put a couple drops. Let me proof that down a little bit and see what you get out of it. And you might need a little bit more, and that's fine.
We had a 150, 126 here that was honestly tasted like 110, and it was so dangerous because you'd be drinking, all of a sudden it's like God's pulling on my cheeks right now. Like, what's happening? Like, oh, it's 151 proof, and it did not taste that hot at all.
Yeah.
So there's a hazmat in your lineup actually that you guys have right there.
Yeah.
That I mean, this brand, it's interesting. Like, so 3 of these are original distillate. One of them is sourcing, okay, but they're doing a blend, and they're finishing in 5 different barrels. Char 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a toasted. Like, they're literally doing. I'm like, who the hell's the money and the time? And only Craft would do something fucking crazy like that.
Who's got that? Yeah.
This dude, we're gonna visit him this summer. He's super eccentric, and I mean, this guy's somehow sourcing really badass, really well-aged whiskey, and he's got the barrels to just fuck around, I guess.
Screw around with it.
That's cool. Bobby, we got some questions, but I feel like we basically covered.
Yeah, we crushed this.
You guys crushed it.
No, we just
covered
let
it
you
all.
talk. We didn't do anything. We just let Bobby talk.
Like our last one was like, what do you have in the future? And like, I'm so curious, like so interested to hear about like the restaurant, the hotel aspect of it. Like,
What excites you?
I mean, I'm really excited for the restaurant model because if you look at what happened during COVID, all these restaurants are suffering because they gave up a VIG to DoorDash and Uber Eats now, right? And so what they're not looking at is the turnaround with servers now. These massive turnarounds because they're not getting the traffic, they're not getting the tips anymore, right? We've got a model that is going to be a turnkey blind tasting in these restaurants, and I can't tell you how we're going to do it, but no one will ever be able to do what we're about to do because first of all, once again, you got to figure out why has nobody done this, and I quickly figured out why it was a problem. It's not going to be our kits at the restaurants; it's going to be a different form of it, but. We get to wrap our arms around these small American distillers again in a much bigger way, but we also get to help these other small American businesses, these restaurants that need that foot traffic to come back in.
will it be more like big brand?
Nope. Still be craft. It'll still be,
awesome.
look, these places are, if you go to these restaurants, they got craft beer at the wazoo, right?
Right.
And they got craft cocktails, but they don't have craft whiskey. There's a void in the market for that.
Right.
So for these brands that aren't outside their state, to get them in a bunch of these restaurants, we're going to start in California, expand to Florida, and really get into these other states that are friendly in terms of brands getting outside of their state and all the filings that they have to do for that. But no, we're still going to focus on the goal is that they're going to start taking that bullet off the shelf and start putting Rocktown on the shelf.
Right. Awesome.
That's so cool. You know what? I can't wait. Like Bobby, we could talk to you for hours. I know that you don't have hours and we don't have hours, but I think that we could just listen to you talk about Blind Barrels and your thoughts on the whiskey industry as a whole. But we have some whiskey to taste, and we got to get into this tasting. I'm a bit nervous, Kyle. Like, honestly, because like
I'm just giddy as hell. I can't freaking wait.
I got that, but I'm just a little bit like, okay, we've got to put 6-8 years of whiskey knowledge into this thing, and
we got it.
Like, I don't feel like we're going to be judged, but I'm judging myself. I'm prejudging myself.
I think you guys are going to do great in the blind because if you look at your logos, you don't have eyes in either of your logos, so you guys are already blind. You guys are built for this.
I like that.
Look at this.
Look at that.
Man.
Look, it's blind.
That's so true.
Look, even the logo's blind. It's crazy. Well, let me know how it goes. I'm excited to hear the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bobby, thank you so much for talking with us. And I know that Drep and Stone, all the listeners are going to be super excited to dive into some of Blind Barrel's tasting boxes. These are going to be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely love everything that you're doing, Bobby. Thank you so much for visiting with us and sharing the story.
Oh, cheers, guys. My pleasure. Thank you.
So like we mentioned at the top of the episode, this was part 1 of a 2-part series featuring Blind Barrels. Next week, we're going to release our tasting with the Blind Barrels double blind tasting pack labeled Heat. That's release 13. So until then, we'd like to know, have you had a chance to sample any of the Blind Barrels whiskey tasting boxes?
Yeah.
You can get in touch with us through email. That's drepandstone@gmail.com. You can also get in touch with us through social media.
On social media, it's a singular word.
Yeah.
It's Drep and Stone, one word. DREP and Stone.
Oh.
Look for us on Instagram.
Sure.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Twitter.
Yeah.
Tinder.
Why not?
Wherever you like to socialize media, come find us. We're there.
Yeah.
Like a thing, share a thing, comment on a thing, and we'd appreciate all those things.
Definitely. And we'd love it if you support Drep and Stone. You can do so through our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Drep and Stone. You can rate us wherever it is. You get great podcasts like this one. And finally, Kyle.
Sir?
You can tell someone that you're probably sharing a Blind Barrels tasting box with about Drep and Stone.
Yeah.
Again, we'll see everybody next week for part 2 of our episode with Blind Barrels. On that note, hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
May your glass overflow.
And your ass never show. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.